Okay. In the description box, it'll be a link to what I'm going to sample from, and I'll timestamp the samples. Now, Lex Vortex, I know him to be somebody who will often delete live streams. Right? It's there now, but if by the time you hear this commentary and go to click on it and it says this video is on private or it's been deleted, then, hey, it is what it is. Whatever happens, happens. But now, Lex is one who thinks he's opposed to capitalism. And I'm not going to get into why he only thinks he is, but there are two things that all anti-capitalists do, or all of the ones I've encountered, either by just listening to them or if I'm arguing with them on a comment board. One thing that most of them do is that they will outright deny something, and they'll also refuse to say something. Now, the title of Lex's stream is, Who is the President of Capitalism? Answer, Satan. Okay, that's the title. And Lex is reading from articles. That's what you're going to hear in the first maybe 3 minutes. He's going to deny something.
Criticism of laissez-faire. So here's they giving you criticisms. Like, one of the chief criticisms of laissez-faire is that capitalism as a system has moral ambiguities built into it. It does not inherently protect the weakest in society. While laissez-faire advocates argue that if individuals serve their own interests first, societal benefits will follow. You see when people are having these conversations, it's like they're not really versed in the origins of these things. You know what I'm saying? I was listening to the debate between Out the Blue and Annan, and it's just like the dude Annan just doesn't know what he's talking about. Whenever you hear like black people that think they're somehow involved in this system in a way, they argue things that, but they don't know the origin or really the foundational principles that lead up to where we are today. So, laissez-faire advocates argues that if individuals serve their own interests first, societal benefits will follow. That is just ass backwards from the beginning. How do you figure that if everyone just served their own interests first, societal benefits will follow? So we know this is coming from the minds of selfish people. How is serving your own interests first going to lead to societal benefits? No, serving the society first will lead to societal benefits for individuals in a society. Now, detractors feel laissez-faire actually leads to poverty and economic imbalances. The idea of letting an economic system run without regulation or correction in effect dismisses or further victimizes those most in need of assistance, they say. The 20th century British economist John Maynard Keynes was a prominent critic of laissez-faire economics, and he argued that the question of market solution versus government intervention needed to be decided on a case-by-case basis. All right, so that is some of the concepts of laissez-faire, and which is the term today that leads to what they call free market capitalism, or there's no government regulations and interventions or whatever. So we got to understand that. So let me get this other information out real quick. A lot of people try to say, "Oh, you just talking about what's his name? Karl Marx. You just talking about Marxism." No.
All too typical and can be expected and that is to deny that his anti-capitalism is Karl Marx. All of them do that. You heard him say, no, it's not Marxism. But he's reading these articles. Let's see where he ends up at.
Beginning in the 18th century in England, the focus of capitalist development shifted from commerce to industry. The steady capital accumulation of the preceding centuries was invested in the practical application of technical knowledge during the Industrial Revolution. The ideology of classical capitalism was expressed in an inquiry into the nature and causes of wealth of nations by the Scottish economist and philosopher Adam Smith, who recommended leaving economic decisions to the free play of self-regulating market forces. After the French Revolution, and I really want to go into Adam Smith, but I'll get back to that. Decisions of free play and self-regulated market forces. After the French Revolution and the Napoleonic Wars had swept the remnants of feudalism into oblivion, Smith's policies were increasingly put into practice. Now, you got to know that capitalism comes out of feudalism, right? The policies of the 19th century political liberalism included free trade, sound money, balanced budgets, and minimum levels of poor relief. The growth of industrial capitalism and the development of the factory system in the 19th century also created a vast new class of industrial workers whose generally miserable working and living conditions inspired the revolutionary philosophy of Karl Marx. Marx's prediction of an inevitable overthrow of capitalism and a proletarian-led class war proved short-sighted, however. That's what they say, but actually Karl Marx was on point.
His reading led him right into Karl Marx. Led him right there. And how is he going to say that he's not doing Marx, but then says that Marx was on point? This entire anti-capitalism movements are centered in deception. They don't even want people to know that it's communist. The article said that Marx was short-sighted. Short-sighted means that Marx, although it sounded good, he didn't consider that people will eventually, that they're going to eventually rise up against that. And I'll get back to that short-sighted thing later if I don't forget. But anyway, I said that there's one thing that they'll deny, and that is that their mindset is Karl Marx. The other thing I said is that they'll refuse to say something. And that refusal to say something is that they want government to control all things concerning economics. And controlling economics would result in the control of damn near everything else we do. Damn near. Right? There are many deceptions in the anti-capitalist people. One of them, as I've been pointing out, is that they don't even want people to know where their mindset is even coming from or what they're really up to. They cloak their inspiration and intentions. Right? And they do it mostly by tugging on people's heartstrings, giving us examples of the dirt that people will do for money. See, you see that? See what capitalism did? Capitalism is why that person did that. Right? They tug on people's heartstrings. But they don't want people to really actually think. They just want people to get up in their feelings about stuff. Now, a few weeks ago, Shawn James did a nearly flawless piece on why communism fails. And, it's kind of contrary to what he said in the past as far as workers' rights and a few other things, but whatever. He talked about what people are made of in that video, and I'll have that in the description box as well.
One of my viewers wanted me to talk about communism. Now, when it comes down to your communism, most of these young kids think that it's the big thing. However, as somebody who has studied history, I can tell you that communism is a disaster from day one. Now, those who believe in communism have this ideal that everybody will get the same equal share from an entity known as the state. However, the state is made up of people and people have a sin nature that's born in them from the fall of Adam and Eve, and it's that fall from grace that leads to these people having that sin nature that makes them their own worst enemy. Now, your communism has the ideal that everyone will have the same equal amount of resources provided to them by the state, and that the state owns all of the property. However, again, the state is composed of individuals, and because the state is composed of individuals, these individuals have a sin nature, and this sin nature leads to them becoming greedy. So you can have a system that talks about allocating equal resources to people, but man's own sin nature will ensure that he is going to take more for himself if he is in positions of power than those who are supposed to get equal shares. And your communists, they want it's a place where people at the top abuse people at the bottom, and they all talk about the ideal of equal, but there is nothing equal because your man has a natural sin nature that is evil, and with that natural evil sin nature, oftentimes it's his greed that winds up corrupting that communist system, and what happens is that communist system winds up falling apart, like Russia and the USSR's communist system did back in 1989. Finally, the system wound up collapsing under the weight of so much corruption that the entire communist system of the great United Soviet Socialist Republic wound up collapsing because all of the people who were supposed to be good and looking out for the best interest of the people, they wound up becoming so corrupt that they wound up undermining all of the ideals that they promoted. And the reality was that eventually the government could not sustain itself because there were no good people in that government from day one. And again, it proves the point of God that man's nature is evil, and because his nature is evil and he is filled with sin, he will always undermine himself in any sort of system.
No system will stop people from being greedy or violating any of the other things we know as the seven deadly sins. Look at the antitrust laws, and for whoever don't know, the antitrust laws are put in place to stop companies from gobbling up everything in sight, becoming too big. And I don't remember what Shawn said in this video that made me type this on this comment board, but part of what I said was the innate nature of mankind is why antitrust laws only work for a little while. Then they have to be reinforced again where some mega company grew too big and needed to be sliced up into pieces because companies will compete and seek to be on top. Competing is in humans to do that. I also went on to point out how ironic it is that people who hate the government control, they hate government control, but they simultaneously seek to have government ultimately control everything. Now, what did I mean by those laws only work for a little while? Okay, maybe every 5 or 10 years, some company is dragged before Congress and questioned about the size of the company and the tactics that that company used to get that big. You saw it recently with Amazon. You see the CEO of Facebook right in Congress sitting in there right now explaining. So they'll break these companies up, but then you'll see those little pieces grow real big too. It's like, I don't know if you ever did this before, but it's like breaking off a piece of a plant and burying it. That piece you broke off will grow into the same thing that you broke it off from. Now, the critical race theory video I did, the one with the dude, I forget his character's name, but the thumbnail of the dude from Star Trek with the thing on his head and his eyes are glowing. Well, that video was a substitute video that I just decided to do instead of talking about the lunacy of the recent climate change summit that just took place. It was such a mess that I couldn't make heads or tails of it. I didn't even know where to start with that. So I just did something else, and it was that critical race theory video. But Here is a clip from Democracy Now! And I decided to get on the comment board and start bothering people.
This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, the War and Peace Report, as we bring you Climate Countdown. I'm Amy Goodman. Yes, we are covering the Glasgow summit from the United States, from Glasgow itself, and from places around the world for those who couldn't make it to Glasgow. We turn now to 18-year-old Swedish climate activist Greta Thunberg. She spoke on Friday at the rally in Glasgow organized by Fridays for the Future, an international movement of students which grew out of her climate strike outside the Swedish parliament that began in 2018.
It is not a secret that COP26 is a failure. It should be obvious that we cannot solve a crisis with the same methods that got us into it in the first place. And more people are starting to realize this. Many are starting to ask themselves, what will it take for the people in power to wake up? But let's be clear, they are already awake. They know exactly what they are doing. The leaders are not doing nothing. They are actively creating loopholes and shaping frameworks to benefit themselves. It seems like their main goal is to continue to fight for the status quo. And COP26 has been named the most exclusionary COP ever. A 2-week-long celebration of business as usual and blah, blah, blah. And the voices of future generations are drowning in their greenwash and empty words and promises. And the question we must now ask ourselves is, what is it that we are fighting for? Are we fighting to save ourselves and the living planet? Or are we fighting to maintain business as usual?
Louis Wilson, you're a senior advisor with Global Witness, which just put out an analysis of the hundreds of fossil fuel lobbyists flooding COP26 climate talks. You found, quote, if the fossil fuel lobby were a country delegation at COP, it would be the largest with 503 delegates, 24 more than the largest country delegation. Your colleague, I want to go to this clip, Dominique Kavakeb with Global Witness, made this video as he documented the greenwashing events at COP26 that promote fossil fuels under the guise of renewable energy.
I'm here at COP26 and I'm standing outside the European Union's pavilion area. It's their official area where they host all of their side events. And this week they've got a number of events under the banner Energy Transition, which sounds fantastic until you realise that they have handed the mic over to a whole bunch of fossil fuel companies and their lobbyists to organise some of these events. This includes an event on hydrogen hosted by the lobby group Hydrogen Europe, whose members include the likes of Shell, Total and Equinor. And they've been pushing the European Commission to allow hydrogen produced using dirty fossil electricity the label of renewable. We've also got a whole load of other events run by gas companies the likes of GRT Gaz in France, Italy's Snam, all with the aim of promoting their work and promoting the gas industry.
Of course, the big fossil fuel people are going to dominate the summit because at the end of the day, the green energy delusion belongs to them anyway. But I'm not going to talk about that. On the comment board, I'm in several places on that board under different people's comment threads, but I want to read one of my comments under that I posted under a dude named Alex. But before I read that, let me read a reply to, let me read a post that someone made to me. His name is Kingston. He said to me, he said, quite sad that some people don't quite understand sarcasm. You have my sympathy. Right, that's what he said. Now, Kingston said that because he saw people's responses to mine like this one. Right, I made this comment to a dude named Carlos. I said, the serpent in the Garden of Eden was a metaphor for capitalism and not an actual serpent. Capitalism is the real reason God threw Adam and Eve out of the garden. He even told, God was a capitalist, he even told Adam where he could go find gold. Study your Bible, Carlos. And the gold reference was in regard to the book of Genesis, chapter 2, verse 12. And what started that was Alex saying, in response to the video where, you know, the climate change video I just showed you, the little clip. Alex said, this problem won't go away until capitalism goes away for sure. So I came with the sarcasm. Right? And the Garden of Eden comment wasn't my only comment on that thread, but I decided to get just as silly as they was on there. See, because Alex, like Lex and others, are in denial of the innate nature of people. It won't matter if capitalism is gotten rid of. People are still going to act up. And capitalism has been in every system, including communism. It's not going anywhere. Now, let me give you an example of how history repeats itself as far as the antitrust laws. The website Rumble, and you on there you have a lot of, it's been a lot of conservatives over these past few years, right, that's been complaining about the big tech oligarchs and their overrunning of smaller businesses, right? And we all know that most of that talk comes from the DNC side, but Republicans do that too. It's just not as widespread as Democrats. It's not as loud as coming from the Democratic side, but conservatives do it too. But in October, Rumble bought a smaller website called Locals. And today, December 10th, 2021, I see that Rumble has announced that it is set to merge with NASDAQ. And what is NASDAQ? What, to make it short and to put it plain, it's Wall Street. And in between and before the mergers I mentioned, there have been others bought out and merged by Rumble. So, I figure that it won't be long before Rumble is sitting before Congress explaining how it got so big. Now let me make my way out of this with this here thing. The deceptions in people's desire for a communist socialist state. The deception in how they'll hide the fact that they're coming from Karl Marx, or even they'll even hide what they're even up to, which is state control. Now, just over a week ago, Wikipedia decided that it was going to delete the results of communist socialist regimes. They decided that they were going to delete it. I don't know if they actually, well, I'm going to go check after this, but they announced it. And I look at this kind of stuff, and it reminds me of how people shout with joy about statues of Robert E. Lee being taken down. But they have no idea what stuff like that is connected to. Right? It's connected to book burnings that we've heard about throughout history. It's connected to book burnings and all other signs that a communist regime is on the way in. But let's look at the deception. This is all aligned with the taking down of statues and counseling the Dukes of Hazzard. Look what they want to get rid of.
Wikipedia is set to delete the entry on its page, referring to the hundreds of millions of mass murders, which devastated subjugated peoples under communist regimes during the last 100 years. According to the Telegraph November 27, the idea of deleting that information has generated much criticism, including from Cambridge historian Professor Robert Toombs, who sees it as an attempt to whitewash communism. Toombs emphasized, this is morally indefensible, at least as bad as Holocaust denial, because linking ideology and killing is the very core of why these things are important. He added, I have read the Wikipedia page, and it seems to me careful and balanced. Therefore attempts to remove it can only be ideologically motivated, to whitewash communism. Some users dedicated to maintaining the site consider that the information expresses a biased, anti-communist, concept, and the administrators will decide whether it should be removed. The bookmarked page describes the deaths of millions of people during the communist regimes imposed in the Soviet Union, China, Ukraine, Cambodia, Cuba, Yugoslavia, Romania, East Germany, and North Korea, with numerous sources. For his part, the director of the Federation for Defense of Democracies, Cliff May, goes so far as to call those who try to purge this historical data as accomplices. May said, according to the Telegraph, those who attempt to erase this long and terrible history of criminality should be seen as accomplices after the fact, paving the way for more tyranny in the future.